The noon sun hung over Dry Creek like a blazing, merciless judge, bleaching the wooden storefronts and casting long, sharp shadows that cut through the dusty street where life moved slow. Too slow. For a woman who ran barefoot across the dirt, her dress torn, her breath breaking in her chest as she screamed for the men ahead of her to stop, to look back, to realize they were tearing her soul out of her body with every step they took. But men like them didn't look back, not when they believed the law or what passed for law in a place like this was on their side, not when they thought a woman's baby could be weighed like silver on a scale and marked down as payment for a debt she never meant to owe. Elena Reeves had not cried the day her husband's coffin was lowered into the ground, nor had she cried the night the banker came to her door, hat in hand, voice dripping with false sympathy as he explained that John Reeves had died owing a sum no widow could hope to pay. But she cried now, the tears hot and blinding as she watched two hired enforcers drag away the wooden cradle that held her 3-month-old son, Samuel. The only piece of John she had left in the world, the only reason she woke in the morning and fought through hunger, exhaustion, humiliation, and fear. And behind the cradle, the men pulling it, grimy men with long coats, sharp eyes, and hands that had grown too comfortable hurting. Others walked with the swagger of men who enjoyed this kind of cruelty, who liked that the entire damn town had gathered to watch the spectacle, like it was some sort of entertainment instead of a mother's worst nightmare coming to life. "You can't!" Elena screamed, her voice cracking as she clawed through the dust toward them, her fingers digging into the ground until they bled. "You can't take him. He's all I have. Please, he's just a baby." But the men didn't flinch, didn't falter, didn't even spare her a glance, because their orders weren't to feel, they were to collect. Behind them stood the courthouse, its white pillars chipping under years of sun and sand, where hours earlier the judge, bribed or bullied, Elena didn't know which, had declared that since she had no land, no cattle, no valuables, the infant child would be taken temporarily, as collateral until the debt could be repaid, an arrangement that made half the crowd gasp and the other half raise their eyebrows, but no one, not a single living soul, dared to fight it, because the man demanding the child, Bartholomew Crane, owned half the town and terrorized the other half. Crane stood on the courthouse steps now, a tall figure in a black coat with a face carved from cold stone and eyes that saw people only as numbers on ledgers. He watched Elena scream and collapse, and the corner of his mouth twitched, not in pity but in satisfaction, because he liked when people broke. He liked knowing their suffering made him more powerful. Elena pushed herself up again, her legs trembling, her throat raw with sobs, dismounted slowly, boots hitting the ground with a thud that vibrated through the silence, his height casting a long shadow, his beard thick and wild, his coat made from stitched hides that told stories without him saying a word, and people whispered the name they'd only heard in passing, the kind spoken around campfires, the name of a man who lived in the high mountain passes where only wolves survived. Asher Cale, the mountain man who never came down unless he had reason, and nobody knew his reason today, but the way his glacier blue eyes scanned the town made the air feel tighter, as if he already sensed the rot buried in its bones. And for Alara, who stood across the street holding a basket of laundry with trembling hands, the moment their eyes met felt like the world paused, like the universe took one breath and exhaled possibility, because she saw something in him she hadn't seen in anyone else. Strength, not the brute kind, but the moral kind, the kind that didn't flinch from darkness. And he saw something in her too, something bruised and scared, but still burning. And though he didn't know her story yet, didn't know her name or her pain, he felt a pull, a stirring in his chest that he hadn't felt in years, something urging him to step toward her. But before he could, the saloon doors burst open with Bragg Dalton marching out, flanked by 2 of his men, smirking at the newcomer as though the town belonged to him alone, and he called out, "We don't welcome wanderers here," his voice dripping with false confidence. But Asher didn't even look at him, didn't acknowledge him, which made Bragg bristle with indignation because he was a man used to being feared, and the stranger's indifference cut deeper than any insult. But Asher's eyes were on something else, on the upstairs window of the saloon, where a tiny shape moved, a baby-sized shape, a shadow behind thin curtains. And though he didn't understand why yet, something inside him shifted, a hardening, a quiet fury the kind that only rose in him when something innocent was trapped or threatened, and he finally spoke, his voice low, gravelly, the voice of a man who rarely needed to speak twice. "Whose child is that?" The moment Asher Cale lifted Micah into Alara's trembling arms, the world around them seemed to fall away, the wind softening, the townsfolk holding their breath, and Alara collapsing to her knees as she pressed her baby to her chest, whispering his name again and again, as if saying it could erase every nightmare she'd endured. But even as tears streamed down her face and Micah's tiny hands curled into her dress, Asher stood behind her like an unmoving wall of protection, his broad shoulders squared, his eyes fixed on the saloon doors where Bragg Dalton's men still hovered, too afraid to intervene yet too loyal to run, and the tension in the air felt like the moment before lightning strikes, heavy and charged. But Asher didn't reach for his weapon. He simply breathed slow and